Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. I am Katie Bishop Kendrick. I'm one of the National Senior Advocacy Consultants with the Voices for Healthy Kids team, and we coordinate the National Collaborative for Infants and Toddlers. And part of my job is that I get to work with various campaigns and folks around the country that are working to try to make sure that prenatal to three families have access to the healthy, affordable foods that they need. So I'm really excited that we're going to get to learn more about some work that's been happening in New Jersey the past few years. Next slide. But before we get into that, just a few housekeeping things. First is that this meeting will be recorded and that within a week we'll send out the slides and any materials that folks share. This is a large group, so everyone please remember to keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. If you do need technical assistance, you can reach out to my colleague Andrea Guarnero, who is leading our tech today. And then throughout the webinar, if you do have questions, you can put those into the chat box. We will have a Q&A period a little bit later in the webinar. And then during that, if you would like to raise your hand and come off mute and ask your question, you're welcome to do that. Closed captioning is available through Zoom if you want to be able to utilize that. And then also in the future, the NCIT is happy to provide translation services for any of the webinars that we provide. So just let us know when you're registering if that is something that would be helpful to you. Next slide. And so today we're going to be hearing about the New Jersey Office of the Food Security Advocate, how that office came to be and the work that they've been doing. We're also going to hear from the Tepper Foundation and a really great public-private partnership that has occurred in New Jersey to help support this work. Then we'll go into our question and answer period. And then finally, you'll be hearing about moving forward, work that's going to be happening around food security for the prenatal to three community. So next slide. And so our speakers today. So first, you're going to be hearing from Mark Dinglasan, who serves as the inaugural executive director of the New Jersey Office of the Food Security Advocate to coordinate statewide efforts and strategies to improve food security. He previously led nonprofit organizations in Paterson, New Jersey, and Chicago, focusing on addressing the root causes of hunger and poverty through community empowerment and collective impact. With more than 22 years of experience in both the corporate and nonprofit sectors, Mark has led teams in the areas of organizational development and strategy, fundraising and partnership cultivation, trauma-informed program design, and community engagement. And then you are also going to be hearing from Dr. Jenny Schrum, who is the Director of Research and Evaluation Strategy at the New Jersey Office of the Food Security Advocate, where she leads efforts to build food security frameworks and implement research to identify best practices and gaps. She previously served as the Director of Strategy and Evaluation at City Green, advancing sustainable agriculture and statewide food access programs, and began her career at Horton's Kids in Washington, D.C., developing food security initiatives such as a community garden and nutrition education. And then in the next section of the webinar, you're going to hear from Rose Rodriguez, who is Portfolio Manager for New Jersey at the Tepper Foundation. In her role, she leads food security, capacity building, and community impact giving. With 14 years of experience in the philanthropic space, Rose is driven by the belief that collaboration can best serve vulnerable communities and address critical challenges. And then finally, at the end of the presentation, you're going to be hearing from Amilcar Guzman, who is a program officer at the Pritzker Children's Initiative. In his role, he leads the foundation's prenatal to three food security strategy. He also works to support national and state partners as they seek to implement effective systems to improve the lives of those furthest from opportunity. Prior to his time with the Pritzker Family Foundation, Amilcar worked on Capitol Hill and served in a variety of education policy and research roles in the Washington, D.C. area. He has nearly 2 decades of experience experience developing federal, state, and local policies, researching innovative solutions that best support historically underserved populations, and teaching the next generation of public policy professionals. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark and Jenny to talk about New Jersey. And I'm also going to pop a link in the chat box that includes their full bios if you want to read even more about them.
Thank you, Katie, and happy holidays to everybody, and good afternoon to everybody. Let me start off by thanking Katie and Amilcar for having Rose, Dr. Jenny, and I here with you all today. So, as was mentioned, my name is Mark Dinglasan. I am the food security advocate for the state of New Jersey. Next slide, please. You heard my background, and I know that there's a lot of you on this call that work in the prenatal to three field. So I feel it's very important to emphasize to you all, my background is in juvenile justice, positive and adverse childhood experience, maternal health, and DEI from Chicago. So as Dr. Jenny and I go through the work that we have been doing at the Office of the Food Security Advocate, know that I view this work through that lens. And I do strongly believe there is so much interconnectivity between all the work for our mothers and our parents and caregivers and our children and our food security work. This office was created through legislation in 2021, and I took office in September of 2022. What makes this office unique, as you can see from this slide, we are in the governor's office, but we work very closely with the legislature here in New Jersey. A couple of other things that make us unique. We are independent, so my role is somewhere in between. I'm below a cabinet member and equivalent to an ombudsman. And I have my own budget. I have my own team. Dr. Jenny is our director of research and evaluation. And we also have legislative mandates. I know many of our national partners have asked, how do you start this? What do you do to create a state level food security office? So those are some of the key things. Some other key things that I think make this office work really well. We're physically based. Our office is physically based in the Department of Agriculture. So we are right here with New Jersey's food supply, where we have more than 10,000 farms and 6 commercial fishing ports. And much of our food is still not getting to our parents, our caregivers, our children, our families. So it makes a lot of strategic sense that we're in the Department of Agriculture. Some other things that make this office really work is we have champions in the legislature. I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to Speaker Craig Coughlin, the Speaker of our General Assembly, and Governor Murphy. They have championed the creation this office. I will also emphasize, for those of you that wonder what makes OFSA work, we have buy-in from community leaders. I was one of the community leaders signing the petitions to create this office and ended up running the office. And we also had buy-in from philanthropy as well. I actually, as a community leader, found out about this office getting created through legislation through my partners in philanthropy. Next slide, please. One thing that I want to emphasize to you all is a saying that I use all the time. I've used this throughout my career, and I believe it applies to what we do here at OFSA. Culture eats strategy for lunch every day of the week. So when we started this work, this was about more than creating data points or creating or spelling out a strategy. This was about creating a culture and creating a movement. So when the office was created through legislation in 21 and I took office in 22, the first thing I said to myself is, I need a rally point to get as many people as possible to agree on what we're going to try to do here. So the way we did that, and the way I did that, is we centered this work on 2 things: research and evaluation. So Dr. Jenny is the very first person that I hired. And then lifting up community voice. So marketing and communications, led by Jamel's Washington Rock, is the second person that I hired. And we have stayed true to centering OFSA on these 2 things. So if you were to ask me, how are you building the culture and the community of practice that you're building in New Jersey? Center it on research and evaluation, and lifting up community voice. From there, that's where we created the rally point that you will hear about more from Dr. Jenny. The first thing that I did when I started, I took office in September of 22. By October, I had drafted a work plan that I had given to the governor's office that said, this is what I'm going to do. And when you're trying to create culture and build a movement, and you're trying to get buy-in, especially from something like the governor's office, I want to share that there are a couple of things that I think are really important. Define the problem. What's the problem you're going to try to solve? I have a rule. If you don't tell me within the first 30 minutes of a meeting that I've attended, what's the problem we're trying to solve, probably not coming back to your meeting. So for the governor's office, right out of the gate, I define, here's what I think the problem is. And then you have to look at, what are your potential solutions for how you're going to solve it? Who are you going to work with? And where are you going to work? You have to define these things. And OFSA has never wavered from these defined parameters that we have. We also said at the beginning of this that we were going to work on advising the governor's office, working with the legislature, working with our state agencies, collaborating with philanthropy, and lifting up community partnerships, especially community partnerships where local government wants to buy in. Very important to emphasize, we have never wavered from those goals. And I think that has led to the brand that we have built at OFSA and the reputation we have. I will also say that one of the most important things is we put our money where our mouth is right out of the gate. We strategically invested, and I strategically invested in research and evaluation, live convenings of community leaders, and marketing and communications. A lot of people thought when we started this office that what we were going to do was use a lot of our budget for salaries, but no, we actually used a lot of it. Well, no, Dr. Jenny, that's not true. No, just kidding. We invested really strategically and put a lot of money into creating research and evaluation. Next slide, please. These are the three concepts, the three C's that I have used to set OFSA up to the point where Dr. Jenny can now take us through strategic planning, building connections, creating collaboration, and creating consensus. I want to read for you all the vision statement that I gave to the governor's office in 2022 as part of that work plan. As an office, we must care, collaborate, and convene, and only when absolutely necessary, create. Many strong initiatives are already working to enhance food security in New Jersey. OFSA is committed to engaging with these programs, building trust, fostering collaboration across and beyond all New Jerseyans. Our role is to unify efforts, document and evaluate progress, and compile relevant research to guide our work. When necessary, we will develop new programs informed by these insights and partnerships. Even as recent as yesterday, I always get the question, what's the staying power of your work and your office? How do you ensure that this will last beyond just you, Mark? Because you can't determine that you're going to be the food security advocate forever. My response is always the same. The goal was never to own food security work in New Jersey, and for OFSA to never be the one central point to this. The goal was to ground everything in research and evaluation, community voice, and document everything. That gives this office staying power. I want to share with you all that when we talk about connections, we have used our very unique position to be able to connect key partners across leaders and across the state. Creating coalitions is like herding cats, and creating agreement in coalitions is like herding cats. But it's much easier for coalition leaders to bring people together when a .gov shows up, when the governor's office shows up. So we purposefully understand that, we sit in that, we acknowledge that, and so we stay true to that reputation that we are going to be the bridge builders. In terms of collaboration, one of the first things that I always ask, and one of the last things I always ask, is how can we help? Whether we're meeting with a nonprofit, county government, municipal government, philanthropy, we always ask, how can we help? What that has done is it has built a brand, a trusted brand for this office that even as a state agency, as a part of the governor's office, we truly deliver on this, on what we say we believe in, that we're about connecting people here, that we're about collaboration. We acknowledge as OFSA that we are not the experts. Dr. Jenny and I love to believe that we're really smart people, but we acknowledge that we are not the only smart people in the room, that there's value in everybody that's coming to the table. So that is what creates this authentic and genuine collaboration here in New Jersey. And finally, I will say that we work on building consensus. Now, when we talk about consensus and creating agreement about what this work is, and again, you'll hear the rally point from Dr. Jenny, the definition of food security that we use. A lot of people think that you need to get everybody to agree. I'm here to emphasize to you all, out of the gate, and this is what we did at OFSA, you don't need everybody to agree. You just need your early adopters to agree. You need champions to agree, and you need early adopters to agree, and make your consensus something that is scalable and replicable. That leads to greater consensus that becomes sustainable. And that is what has led us to a lot of the work that we're doing. Next slide, please. These are just a few of the projects, victories that we've had on this slide. I want to emphasize when the federal, when these two federal programs, the local food purchase cooperative agreement and farm to school, and thankfully farm to school has been relaunched by the USDA, but the local food purchase cooperative agreement program that was meant to create innovative procurement practices and create agricultural innovation and infrastructure for our underrepresented farmers. When that program ended, through consensus, collaboration, and connections, we were able to successfully advocate for the creation of a state level version of this program. This is what happens when you build a movement where you have champions, especially in the legislature, is you can advocate at the state level for things like this. Next slide, please. And finally, on this slide, I want to emphasize we are creating momentum where now we are at this point where our office has also been given a line item in the state budget to deploy funding directly through our office for regional food security innovation efforts. This is this $1.625 million that we will be deploying in partnership with some of our partners in philanthropy. So New Jersey truly is not just talking about it, we're doing it, and we're putting our money where our mouth is. But the key to all of this is that we did all of this work over the last 3 years to bring us to this point where we would create the New Jersey Food Security Strategic Plan. Many people asked me in the first year of this office, when are you going to do the plan? When are you going to do the plan? And I said, it's not time yet. We needed connection, collaboration, and consensus. By October of 2024, I looked at Dr. Jenny Schrum and I said, we're ready. It's time for us to start the strategic planning process. And with that, I want to turn it over to my Director of Research and Evaluation, Dr. Jenny Schrum.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. Great to be with you today. I'm excited to talk about New Jersey, my favorite place ever, and also the strategic plan, which was wrapping up today, actually. So this is really exciting to kind of talk about it we're about to set it out forth into the world. So first, to start out, I'm going to kind of level set. Let's talk about food insecurity in New Jersey first and how we define food security. And I'm going to go to the next slide. So this is a very basic figure to kind of let you know some of the talking points we talk about when we're talking about quantitatively food insecurity in New Jersey. Usually food insecurity in New Jersey, we tend to do better when it comes to the numbers compared to what happens at the US, the national average. But what we've actually seen in the past couple of years is that difference between New Jersey and the national average is getting smaller and smaller, especially for that senior group. This is MAP the meal gap, so that's 60 plus. the gap is almost actually non-existent anymore. So that's one thing we talk about a lot. New Jersey is kind of trending worse, and it's happening kind of at a larger rate. We also like to talk about the difference between subgroup disparities, right? So thinking about race, ethnicity, especially here in New Jersey, is important. We're a very diverse state. And usually when we talk about food insecurity, a lot of times we kind of lift up one number, right? We'll do the overall average. So a lot of times in Jersey, you'll hear the number 11.7%. But it's really important to look at these subgroup differences so we know areas that we should really be focusing resources and attention to really make change. So in New Jersey, I like to call out a lot when we look at Black all ethnicities and Latino Hispanic groups, it's almost triple that of white non-Hispanics here in the state. And that's really, really important to acknowledge when we're talking about things like strategic planning and wanting to be strategic about how we're going to think about the issue. Next slide, please. It's also really valuable to look at trends over time, right? What's the story? What's the narrative behind these numbers that we're using often? So, if we look at the trend in New Jersey since 2020, the pandemic, we have been increasing rates of food insecurity. But we stayed pretty low in 2020 compared to what we kind of would think would happen during something like a pandemic. But what's happened since 2020 and it's going up? Some factors that we know were really important. We had pandemic relief that existed still in 2020. And as those have ended, right, rates are now going up. We also know cost of living is extremely high, and these are all contributing factors when we think about food insecurity here in New Jersey, but also nationally. So that's the tip of the iceberg when it comes to numbers and we're talking about food insecurity. And next slide, please. And we're going to point you guys to a couple of resources today because I am just scratching the surface of all the great work we've done in terms of research and evaluation here. Actually, today is a big day for the Office of the Food Security Advocate strategic plan, and our new data chart book is out. So we're in our second iteration of the data chart book. We compile public data sources and we kind of analyze them for people. So it's a really easy read to understand the data that's out there that has to do with food security. So contributors to food insecurity, measures of food insecurity, and then consequences of food insecurity, things like health and wellness outcomes that are really important to acknowledge. And a resource like this really helps implementers across the state situate themselves in the landscape of the issue, inform their decision making without having to do all kind of the grunt work when we're looking at all these numbers, right? So I encourage you all to also use the resource. It's obviously through a New Jersey lens, but it talks about the issue, also comparing it to a national scale. And I encourage you to use it through the lens of your own state. Next slide, please. So, my favorite topic ever, if any, I know we have some friends here today, is the dimensions of food security. So, the definition that we use, that we've adopted here in the state of New Jersey, comes from the high level panel of experts. It has been emerging in the past couple years in the literature and in kind of international practice. So, the definition we use is food security exists when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. So it's a tall order, right? That takes a lot of people to make that happen. And that's one sentence. So how can we break that sentence down into something that's a little more tangible and realistic for us to kind of try to tackle? So there are 6 dimensions of food security. We have agency, stability, sustainability, access, availability, and utilization. And the numbers that we commonly reference, those numbers that come from the USDA, tangentially related to map the meal gap, are really measuring that economic access piece, right? The USDA measure will ask questions like, did you ever skip a meal because you didn't have enough money, right? So it's really grounding it in that. We have the opportunity to measure food insecurity across all these other dimensions to better address the needs that are kind of really relevant for different groups of people, different areas, and use our kind of resources more strategically. Next slide. So what do these 6 dimensions mean? So food access, raise your hand as you're sitting at your computer. We've all heard the term food access, right? That's just a piece of the puzzle. So food access is the resources a household has to obtain the appropriate and nutritious food it needs. These are things like someone's budget, right? The finances they have. We also have availability, which is sufficient and nutritious food physically present. So the food I can touch where I live, where I work, where I go to school, what's in my environment. Utilization is the intake of sufficient and safe food to meet my nutritional needs. We hear about things like food is medicine right now. What are the types of food that we have access to for my own needs? We all have also different dietary needs due to medical reasons and due to different kind of food storage I might have at home. Do I have access to safe food storage, refrigeration, and the ability to prepare meals? We are then going to think about stability. So this is the reliable supply of food over time to mitigate. We refer to kind of things in food security world as shocks to the system, right? A shock will happen and it can change your food security. So something like a hurricane, right, could disrupt the supply chain. That's definitely a shock to my food security, depending on where I live. And then we have our two emerging dimensions in the literature and in conversation that have always existed and were always important, but are really getting elevated and appreciated now. So sustainability is food system practices that ensure food needs of the present are met without compromising the future. What types of agricultural practices do we use? Things that food waste. What kind of food system are we really elevating and supporting into the future? And then finally, agency. So this is about kind of power and decision making. Do people have access to the knowledge and information they need to make choices that they feel are best for themselves? Are they able to participate in feedback and policy around the foods that are offered to them? And so all of these things are important for all of us to be food secure. And I'm sure as you heard me talking, you can reflect on how they relate not only to maybe people you work with, but you individually as yourself. And it's really important we talk about food security about all of us because we all need a sustainable food system that we can rely on because that helps take some of this stigma out of when you are experiencing food insecurity. So we really want to all see ourselves in the potential issue that exists. Next slide. So, special edition for you all. How do these dimensions really relate to many of the efforts and work, categories of work that you all work in? So, things like access, our resources, right? What does my household have? Thinking about a lot of these programs that support or bolster my budget, SNAP, WIC, CACFP, right? These kind of help me access these foods that I need. Availability is the physical presence of food. We've got some great work happening here in New Jersey with farm to early childhood programs, making sure we're getting that food that's grown here, right, into cafeterias, Head Starts. It's really great. Utilization, the intake of sufficient and safe food. We all know and love WIC, who also provides a lot of nutrition education, which is super, super valuable. We think about stability. An example that I think several probably people here have witnessed was when there was a formula shortage, right? So that there was a disruption in that supply chain, right? And it really affected food security. When I think about agency, there's some amazing early childhood coalitions that exist that have very loud voices and are advocating and trying to create opportunities for people to kind of advocate for themselves and what they need in their food system. And then sustainability, something like a WIC Double Up Food Books program is tapping into those federal funds, also making sure that gets to farmers, right? So they're able to survive and exist and flourish. Next slide. So if anyone is interested, I'm sure I sold you all. I'm sure you're very interested in the six dimensions now. We have a primer you can check out that'll summarize this again. We're always happy to talk to it. If you'd like to think about how it relates to your work, we would love to hear about it and celebrate it with you. So I encourage you to take it out and adopt the language for your own work when it comes to food security. I think it's really powerful to help people see the value of your work in ways that aren't necessarily always celebrated, but it's all really, really important. So now the good stuff, the strategic plan. Next slide. Next slide, one more. So, as Mark described, OFSA was legislated to exist, which is really amazing and incredible. But we were also mandated to really get out there in New Jersey and identify where there are gaps. So, an example of that was kind of what those bar graphs were, that trend lines, looking at the data. We've also identified gaps just by visiting people. We spent the first 2 years kind of in community, talking to organizations and people and asking them what's hard, what's difficult, where do you see opportunity to improve? And with that, we were also tasked with creating a strategic plan. So we are wrapping up the strategic plan this week. Hopefully, it'll be out in the next few weeks. I think it'll be a really great model for thinking about something as large as kind of this macro statewide type strategic plan. It is not a strategic plan just for OFSA. It is for anyone doing food security work in the state. So it has the potential to create this great culture change, this culture shift that we've kind of been talking about. Next slide. So when I say all people in New Jersey working towards food security, I kind of been talking about almost every sector and every person, right? So we think about food system sectors. We have food producers, food suppliers, right? Very, very long list. We've got those that are implementing food programs. Those can be state, federal, independent food programs. We have influencers, people who are designing big P and little p policies that really change how we can supply, how we can implement. And then, of course, we have consumers. How are people accessing kind of the market channels they have and their ability to get the foods that they, prefer? Next slide. So when creating a strategic plan, we thought with our executive committee, who I'll talk about more in a minute, we really wanted to kind of identify some commitments and values that were to be kind of used to design the strategic plan, but also the intention is for them to be carried through to implementation too, right? So we want community led and community informed approaches. We want to make sure there's equity and opportunity when it comes to funding, implementation. We want to think about, again, right? This is systems change. This is not a burden on one sector or one entity to resolve the issue. It's going to take collective action. We want to think about accountability and transparency. If you're able to share, protected and de-identified data to the conversation, do it. It helps us all to be informed. We also want to use technology and innovation. The world's changing constantly. Let's embrace it as much as possible in the good ways and really take advantage of it to steward the good work. And we want to make sure we're thinking upstream. We want to think about root causes, right? This is hard. There's a lot of people that have needs and demands. We don't want to be reactive. We want to be proactive. We want to stop us from even having to get to the point where we have to figure out like complex, complicated needs, right? And then we also want to make sure that we are, while respecting privacy and security, when talking to community, we want to make sure we're taking advantage of efforts that have always and already exist. New Jersey's been doing great food work for decades before OFSA was around. So we want to uplift those and build with them and on them, right? So those are our values. Next slide. So we have our values. Now we got to think about we need some information to back up our understanding before we create the plan, right? So we had kind of two categories of information. Our great friends from the Center for Nutrition and Health Impact are on the call. I see Amy and Eric. Hello. Have done, and we posted it last week, an incredible report. We partnered with CNHI. They came in and we actually did a survey across those 6 dimensions with community members in New Jersey and then experts kind of in the field to really, like I said, understand those other factors beyond just economic access. Because when we can do that, we can better make a strategy, right, on how to address all those varying needs. So that report's on our website. It's on our socials. Please reach out if you would be interested in reading it. It's incredibly valuable. It is kind of the foundation for our strategic plan. We also looked at a lot of that public data that I talked about before. I see the chart book on our website. We also have a data catalog. You can search and filter through demographics or kind of different measure indicators that you would be interested in. And we'll let you know if there's a public data set that exists in those categories. And then we also, in New Jersey, had about 22 reports that already existed. There were plans that were suggested or assessments of areas. And we wanted to use that as a starting place, right? This isn't about reinventing the wheel. We want to respect a lot of conversations and efforts that have already happened. So we started there to kind of outline the potential strategies that we wanted to use. Qualitatively, we are constantly in conversation with community, doing interviews, listening sessions. We had several convenings with specific sectors that we know are really important stakeholders in the conversation: agriculture partners, charitable food sector, philanthropy, educators. And then what we did when we got to kind of a pretty solid place with much of this, we put out an overview of the strategy we thought were making sense, and we put it out to the public and we asked for feedback. So we had an open-ended survey and we asked New Jerseyans to tell us what they thought, if it resonated with them. And that was super, super helpful. Next slide. Okay, excellent. So again, just in review, our process is we started with those reports to kind of give us our foundation to start with. We also then partnered with CNHI to really unpack those 6 dimensions to ground our understanding in the real issue of food insecurity. We put together an executive committee to help us move these iterations of the strategic plan along. These are cross-sector. You name a sector, they probably were on our executive committee. There was about 25 plus people. A majority of these people had expertise or touch food security in their work, but some worked in social determinants of health or childcare, right? A little different bit of a lens, which was really valuable. We then talked to community, we got iterations of feedback from them. And then, as I said today, we're polishing up our strategic plan to launch in the next couple of weeks. And then the second phase of that, also with our partners at CNHI, will be to develop and implement a toolkit to go along with the strategic plan. And that'll kind of give people a little bit more tangible direction on best practices aligned across the dimensions to make sure that when people are going down these paths and these avenues, they really are going in a positive, strengths-based way that we know usually is successful. So next slide. So these are our 5 main focus areas for our strategic plan. You can check out the overview and some of that methodology by scanning that QR code there. Overall, the main buckets are we want to enhance information exchange and access, thinking about data. We want to expand community-based infrastructure and market channel creation. So what is kind of that ag producer consumer relationship, and how do we make sure that that's really meaningful? We want to build and support local partnerships to drive food security approaches. In New Jersey, we uplift and celebrate and are excited that it's growing in our space is community coalitions and very much county coalitions. They are very effective to bring a multi-sector approach. We also want to collaborate across sectors and state agencies when thinking about federal and state food security programming, right, which all have a lot of constraints or structure around them, and that can be difficult to navigate sometimes. So working together to make that effective. And then finally, thinking about food system resiliency, that long-term sustainability, ag best practices, thinking about climate change, where there might be emergencies that we can build some resilience in. And next slide. So again, just to summarize, right now, we're closing out the New Jersey Food Security Strategic Plan. That stops at that strategy level, right? So it teases out those focus areas a little more. That QR code will show you there's about 3 to 4 strategies within each one of those focus area buckets. It's really the what and why, right? This is what we're talking about and why it's important. The toolkit that'll come out early in 2026 is the how and who, right? It's those model examples. It's really unpacking who's doing what's the impact we really anticipate seeing in a really meaningful way. And next and final slide. Beautiful. The anticipated impact. So measuring food security, as we just summarized, is hard to do. It's very complicated. There's a lot to unpack. And I think we want to make sure that when we're having something like our strategic plan's a 3-year plan, seeing that food security number come down is going to take a little while, right? That's the ultimate goal, but some things that we will be tracking in the immediate that are really important is we want to see who and what sectors are adopting it. Do we have more activities in certain categories that we haven't seen before? Are there new innovative project types? Are there new cross-sector partnerships and collaboration? Are we sharing data in a different and maybe better, stronger way? Is there more funding going towards a lot of these important efforts that maybe haven't been funded before? And then, of course, we want to make sure that people are at the most amount of possible implementing these best practices. So thanks for letting me share. I think I'm passing to Rose next, and everyone feel free to reach out anytime if you'd like to see more detailed information about any of this. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Schrum. Good afternoon, everyone. So happy to be here today, especially talking about food security. I can talk about this all day. By way of introduction, I'm Rose Rodriguez, Portfolio Manager at the Tepper Foundation. This is a quick snapshot of who we are. We work nationally with a special focus on New Jersey, the Tepper family's home state. Our mission is to protect and expand opportunity, meeting basic needs like food and housing, responding to disasters, supporting the Jewish community, combating anti-Semitism, and safeguarding fundamental rights. This slide really captures the core of our work and what guides us. Next slide. So here's a quick look at our recent impact in New Jersey. In 2024, we awarded nearly $11 million in grants to 67 organizations across New Jersey. And importantly, about 4.7 million of that, or roughly 42% of that funding, went directly towards food security efforts in the state. And I think it's just a good signal of our commitment to that sector. And then in 2025, we made an even bigger commitment and we increased our food security grant making to $8.3 million. And again, that growth reflects both the scale of the need and our determination as a foundation to respond. Next slide. And beyond our grant making, we invest directly in strengthening the organizational capacity of our grantee partners. I realize that the title is missing. That should be building organizational capacity. Our goal is to ensure they're not only meeting today's needs, but operating efficiently, sustainably, and with the long-term strength to continue their work. We've invested nearly $1 million in the last year in capacity building efforts, including leadership development, providing access to tools like Impala and Catchafire, webinars and professional service supports, everything from strategic planning, board governance, and financial resilience, and more. It's really exciting to see sort of the shift that I've noticed in our grantee network. Our food security partners in particular have been some of the biggest consumers of these resources. They've really leaned in, taken advantage of every opportunity, which is amazing to see. Next slide. And food security has been one of our longest standing focus areas at the foundation. Our strategy centers on 4 priorities, and you'll see a lot of the dimensions of food security. Dr. Jenny, I hope you're proud. But everything revolves around strengthening the emergency food network, expanding availability of food sources, increasing access to services that help alleviate food insecurity, and catalyzing collaboration and investments across the entire ecosystem. Next slide. And then I would be remiss if I didn't talk about our partnership with OFSA. It's been a real game changer for us as a foundation. They've been an incredible thought partner, helping us sharpen our strategy, opening doors to parts of the food sector that we hadn't fully explored before. This collaboration gives us a much clearer view of the statewide food security landscape, what's working, where the pressure points are, and where our resources can make the biggest difference. And their insights have strengthened our ability to spot gaps and opportunities so we can target support more effectively. And together, we've taken that partnership even further by launching a collaborative donor fund. We wanted to share the wealth and sort of the benefits of having this type of partnership. And that effort has energized grant makers across the state and accelerated coordinated investments in food security in a way that we simply couldn't have done alone. Next slide. So, in partnership with OFSA, we launched the New Jersey Food Fund, and it comes at a very pivotal moment for food security in New Jersey. I know Mark touched on a lot of these things, but OFSA's leadership in the governor's office has reshaped the statewide conversation and brought real rigor to understanding the needs and gaps. And we also have strong commitment from Speaker Coughlin, which has helped elevate hunger as a priority issue for the entire state. He has been a super champion for this work. And then at the same time, we've been able to capture the attention of 11 philanthropic partners who are now collaborating and pulling together resources through the fund to not only provide grant making towards food security, but also organize ourselves as a field, align ourselves with state government, and share our insights and coordinate and reduce redundancies across efforts. It's been, like I said, it's been a real game changer. And together, these forces show what's possible when public-private partners move in the same direction. Next and last slide for me, please. And this is just a quick snapshot of the fund's impact so far. We've awarded 38 grants since the inception of the fund. We've reached 20 of the 21 New Jersey counties with $1.3 million dispersed. We've helped nonprofits bring in resources to the state through our Grant Navigator program, which works one-on-one with organizations to help them apply for public and private funding. And looking ahead to our 2026 grant making, which we're finalizing, our pool is expected to reach $2 million. Again, I don't think we could have gotten this far without not only the attention of our peer funders, but without OFSA's leadership and commitment to this work. And I guess I'll leave it there and pass it over to Amilcar.
So first, we're going to take a little break and we'll do a question and answer period, and then we will circle back to Amilcar. So thank you so much, Mark, Dr. Jenny, and Rose for sharing some of the work that has been happening in New Jersey. Folks, if you do have questions, you can feel free to put those in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and you can come off mute and ask your question. As folks are putting questions in, for Mark and Dr. Jenny, I'm sure there are a lot of other states on the webinar that are thinking this sounds really exciting. I'd love to do something like this in my state. Do you have any tips for them or things that you would want them to think about as they're starting to pursue having a similar office or position in their state?
Sure, I'll start, and then Dr. Jenny chime in with your thoughts as well. I think for me, Katie, the real game changer for the work here in New Jersey was really having champions in our legislature, but champions in our legislature that are really listening to the different stakeholders and community groups. So my suggestion to start, and again, this is exactly how OFSA started, is there was real consensus in philanthropy that this is something that needed to happen, and among community leaders that we needed an office like this. And it wasn't until that was built that I think the legislation to create OFSA really started to gain momentum in the legislature, and people really started to take notice. So I think it is so critical to build multi-sector consensus and have an intentional, strategic, constant cadence that this is important. And then when you get that, then you can create your buy-in in the legislature to create an OFSA.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing I would recommend doing is sometimes food security, when it's not your everyday work, can feel limited in scope. So something like if you go and check out our chart books, thinking about the vast number of indicators or contributors to something like food insecurity, how many people it touches, and then the vast consequences, health, wellness consequences associated with it. I think you can make a really strong case for why food insecurity as a social issue should be a priority for state level government, to really be thinking about the economic impacts, the health impacts, and the number of people that it touches, because sometimes the conversation can be very siloed and limited, just because of the nature of it.
Great. And then since you're at the tail end of going through the strategic planning process, is there anything like as you were going through that process, did you end up getting pulled in a direction that you really weren't expecting at the beginning of that process?
Dr. Jenny, I'll let you go first, but I have a thought on this.
There's not one that sticks out top of mind. Honestly, I think what's most surprising is there was far more agreement right at the beginning than I would have ever expected. But honestly, I think the magic to that is having a framework that really can help ground people in understanding all the factors that are related. It helps you appreciate someone else's opinion and prioritizing a certain category of work. And I think the other thing that was helpful for us is we didn't start saying we can only have 5 priorities, right? We were kind of like, let's see how many we get, and then we can kind of condense and combine as we see fit. So I think the process that we went through, it was incredibly iterative over about a year now. And I think that's probably what made that possible. But I think the most surprising was the level of agreement from the outset. But I think you need a framework that helps people see each other's value or the work's value in different ways that can kind of help steward that.
And Katie, yeah, that's why I paused that I wanted Dr. Jenny to go first, because that's exactly how I felt. We were very intentional. I mean, at one point, it was just Jenny and I, and we were looking at each other saying, okay, this is the direction we're going to go, right? And we have stayed the course. We were very intentional of we need a holistic framework that people feel included and feel seen in. And then we stayed the course in saying, we're going to ground everything in research and evaluation, and we're going to ground everything in community voice. And then we got out in community and listened and advocated and delivered. When folks told us this is what we need, this is what we're seeing, we would advocate for that here at the Capitol. We would infuse that into everything we were doing. So by the time, and that's when in October of 2024, when we felt we were ready, we had built such a community of practice that we were ready, because it's just the culture that we had built just internally for us, that if community tells us that we need to pivot or go in a different direction, we were ready to go there. But I think it's a testament to 2.5 years of community building and consensus building and brand building before we even launched the strategic plan that gave us to the point of, wow, people are agreeing with us. And there'll always be people that aren't on the same page completely, but even for those folks, it was like, yeah, what you're saying makes sense. So again, I want to emphasize 2.5 years before we actually started the strategic planning process.
Yeah, that's great that you were able to really take that time to have all of those conversations and build those connections before jumping in.
Yeah.
And Rose, a question for you. I know that on one of your slide you referenced like you're going to see a lot of the same things here as you saw from what Dr. Jenny was talking about. Has there been anything like in working with Mark and Dr. Jenny and others in the office that has sort of changed the way that the Tepper Foundation is doing their work in New Jersey around food security?
The answer is a combination of yes and no. I think we've largely stayed the course. We're just finalizing our new strategic plan for food security efforts, and I think that strategic plan is reflective of our work over the last few years. However, I was very intentional in adopting the language that OFSA is using. I think framing it and talking about it in a similar way feels very important to me, especially as the work in food security and the framing and how we talk about like what does it mean to be food insecure. It's beyond the economic factors. How do we sort of adopt that theory, that mentality in a way that also feels relevant to the foundation is where that's shown up the most. And also, again, we're capturing what we've done in the last 3 years. I joined the foundation 3 years ago, and yes, we have explored new areas of work because of OFSA's engagement. And I'll give you one example. The agriculture space was a really big blind spot for us. It's something that we hadn't really engaged with, and I remember thinking like, it feels important to think about farmers too, right? If we're looking at food and they're a very big part of the ecosystem, how can we find ways to engage? So we have since started engaging with some farmers, and Mark has made great connections, and we'll keep that flexibility open to continue to be able to respond to emerging needs. And, when the time comes, how do we sort of revamp our strategic plan so that it remains relevant to our current conditions and environment? So,
Great, thank you. Well, thank you all so much for answering those questions. I'm going to turn it over to Amilcar to talk about what's coming next.
Wow. I want to give everyone a round of applause for for that amazing conversation. Thank you to Katie and Voices for Healthy Kids and NCIT for sponsoring this conversation. Mark and Dr. Jenny, wow, just tremendous. When we met this past fall, I was just marveled by the intentional work that you all have done to kind of get to where you are. And I think one of the nuggets that stood out to me was that it really is an intentional process. Mark, you just talked about how it took 2.5 years to kind of get here, right? How you spend time listening, right? How you spent time understanding what the landscape kind of looked like. So tremendous, tremendous. And Rose with the Tepper Foundation being a true partner, right? A true partner in that work. And Mark, you kind of talked about their role and how they're a true partner and how you all are on the same page. So that is just tremendous to see. And kudos to all of you for all the work that's happening. So what does this all mean? So this is just part of the beginning, right? The first conversation. So as we're kind of thinking about food security and we're thinking about the prenatal to three movement, there's a number of things that are in the works. The first is there's been a core set of partners that have been meeting throughout this year to really chart a path forward for what does food security look like for the prenatal to three movement. And so those partners have been Voices for Healthy Kids, FRAC, the Food Research and Actions and Action Center, Feeding America, and the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. So we've been working diligently on if we want to really reduce food insecurity for prenatal to three families, what does that look like? What's that going to take? What's that going to take nationally, federally? What's that going to take at the state level? And so we're working on an agenda that we're looking to release during the first quarter of next year. So look out for that. We've had some things in the works in terms of a virtual release. So that'll be great. We'll likely do some sort of conversation like this one. And coupled with that, we want to be able to not only provide recommendations, right, and just put things out there, but really be able to put some resources, some support behind that, right? So we will be providing some funding opportunities for folks working in different states to really implement some of the recommendations that are outlined in the agenda. Many of those align with things that we heard here today from our friends in New Jersey. But the thought is that folks will then be able to kind of work on different areas. Voices will play a key part in that support, right? In terms of bringing folks together for discussions, bringing folks together for conversations, and really kind of putting together this sort of cohort model of states that are working to reduce food insecurity, particularly for prenatal to three families. So much more to come after this first discussion, but we just want to thank you for taking the time to be with us. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Katie.
Great. Well, thank you, Amilcar, and thank you so much to all of our speakers, Mark, Dr. Jenny, Rose, and Amilcar. And Mark, Dr. Jenny, and Rose, thank you so much for all of the great work that you're doing in New Jersey. I know the people of New Jersey really appreciate it, and we appreciate it too. And we're just really, at Voices for Healthy Kids, we're really excited about this next phase of the work and really highlighting the importance of making sure that prenatal to three families have what they need when it comes to food and nutrition. And so we're just really excited about this next phase that will be starting very soon. And so as you can see, a survey just popped up on your screen. We'd really appreciate it if you would take the survey. We really take your feedback into consideration as we are doing webinars. So just really appreciate that. And when you are done with your survey, you can hop off. And if you do have any questions and follow-up, if you think of anything after the webinar, feel free to reach out and we can connect with the right speaker to get you answers to that. So just thank you everyone for being here today and hope you have a great holiday season.